Hey, my name is Rowan Smith and I want to welcome you to the Training for Trekking podcast. Now, this is the world's very first podcast which is entirely dedicated to helping you train, prepare and conquer your upcoming hike, trek or mountain adventure. So once a week, I'm going to be giving you quality and practical information on the subjects of physical preparation for trekking, dealing with altitude and nutrition on the trail, so you can know everything you need to be doing to have the best chance of a safe, enjoyable and successful adventure. So now you know what you're in for. Let's get into today's episode. Alright, hello guys. Today we are talking all about lateral training for hikers. Now, on this podcast and just in what I talk about in general, most of the time we are talking about training which is kind of up and down, forward and back, and it's all very one direction type of training. So, for example, in strength training, we often talk about, squats and deadlifts and step downs and lunges. In cardio, we might talk about doing hill climbs or stair climbs or whatever. And most of it is all sort of back and forth in one sort of plane of motion. And absolutely no doubt this is important. And there's no doubt that you shouldn't be doing the majority of your training like this, because it's good enough. It does everything we need, more or less. And it's definitely where you want to put the majority of your focus. But if you are just focusing on this and this is all you're doing, there is definitely something that is missing from this equation, because hiking, it's not a controlled track sport, for example, where you're just running in a straight line or just walking in a straight line. And obviously hiking isn't something that you're just doing in one direction, just up and down, just forward and back. We have things like uneven steps, we have rock scrambling, we have, traverses, we have beach walking, and all these really, really different positions that we find ourselves going through. And our bodies really do find ourselves in all these weird and wonderful positions on the trail, which is often half the fun. But it can also often be our downfall. Because when we're in these weird positions, sometimes the body just simply won't have the strength or mobility to be comfortable in that particular type of position. So in, a normal example, if you're stepping up, sideways, doing a weird angle, and you're not strong enough or you're not flexible enough, it may just be a little bit harder than necessary for some people. You might not feel comfortable. It might take a little bit more out of you. You might have to really concentrate, and it might just feel harder if you're not strong or mobile enough in this particular type of motion. But in the more extreme cases, and a lot of us do find ourselves in this area, it can be a high area of risk for injury. Because if you're in this weird position where you're forcing your body into, strange angles and you're not ready for that, and then something goes wrong, maybe, a rock slips out from underneath you, maybe you have a slip, stumble or fall or something like that, and you're already in this weird position, that's generally where injuries tend to happen on the trail. And it is a very, very common thing. So considering this type of thing in your training, where you're sort of teaching the body to be a bit more stable in different positions and not just this forward and back motion, is definitely worthwhile. It's something that most hikers probably should consider. But when we talk about this, and there are some people out there who really go way overboard with this type of thing, and you'll see them doing on training and they'll be like, no, you don't want to be doing this traditional training of squats and lunges, and everything you do has got to be in a 3D direction, and you're going to be stepping this way and that way and this way and that way. And in all honesty, that is just not necessary. A certain element of that is definitely beneficial, but going 100% towards that direction, it's not necessary. How I would recommend it is going through something that's a little bit more simple. And as a hiker, you just want to include a little bit of focus on exercises and training, which kind of goes side to side and in different angles. Now, this never has to be a full training session or anything like that. It never has to be the majority of your training, because you are always going to get the best benefits from, those staples and those proven exercises of step downs and lunges and yada yada. But maybe putting one or two exercises in your weekly programming dedicated to this type of movement could be your answer. And it really, really can be that simple. So when we're talking about this, what type of exercises are actually going to help you in this particular situation? As I said, online, you can find all types of weird and crazy things, and I don't think that's strictly necessary, but simply just changing the angle on some exercises you may be familiar with can make all the difference. So for my clients, a really, really simple progression flow, which I use for clients who have a little bit extra time in their training, we may need to consider this, is the very first exercise we always start with is what's called a lateral step up. So essentially, we all know what a step up is. There's a box or a bench, whatever. We step up and down, pretty stock standard for many hikers. Essentially, what a traditional step up you do is you stand and the box is right in front of you and you step up and down. Now, a lateral step up is super, super simple, but all you do, as opposed to standing with a box in front of you, you stand with a box to your side. So then you step your foot slightly sideways, you push up like that, step down, step off, and go through like that. And what that does is it just adds a tiny little bit extra element to that lateral component. It just challenges the muscles in a slightly different way, and that can be super, super effective. So doing those lateral step ups, whether it's with a low box, a high box, whether it's with body weight, with a dumbbell, with a pack, or whatever it may be, that can be a really good starting point. Now, the next step from that is something that's called a crossover step up, which is a great sort of movement from here. And essentially what you do is you start on one side of the step as normal, you step up onto that step, but instead of stepping back down to where you were at the beginning position, you step to the other side of the step. So you literally step up and then step down on the other side. And then you step up leading with the other leg and then step down with the other side. And you go through that with your step ups. And this is just, again, changing the angles a little bit, adding a little extra complexity, but this is a really, really good progression from that initial step up. And with this one, you can literally just chuck it into YouTube, and all the ones I'm about to explain, you can chuck it into YouTube, just say a crossover step up. Now, the next variation from that is something that's called a lateral split squat, or the one that I use is a lateral split squat. So a split squat is essentially, a traditional split squat is we think about a lunge, where we're in a lunge, we step forward or step back, and then touch the floor, go down, come up, and then back to start position. What a split squat is you're in that position where 1 foot forward is 1 foot back, and instead of stepping back and forth, you hold that position and literally just go up and down. If that doesn't make sense, again, plug it into YouTube, a split squat. Now, a lateral split squat is pretty much the same thing. So you stand 2 feet together, you step 1 foot out to your side, quite a far away, and then you literally go into a lunge from that position. So you drop down and up, and you just hold those legs there. Then the next step from that, once you've mastered that, is a lateral lunge. So you start with 2 feet together, you step out to your side, go into a lunge, come back up, step out to your side, go into a lunge, come back up. And really, really simple. Again, plug it into YouTube. And then the final one for this is something that's called a sliding lateral lunge. And this exercise is basically where you get either a fitness slider, which is just a little bit of plastic which can slide along the floors. You can buy them in any type of sports store or online there, and it should cost you a couple of dollars. Or you can do this with a towel under your foot on a hardwood floor, or if you're on the carpet, you can use a magazine under your foot. And essentially you're doing the same thing as a lunge, except you're using this slider underneath your foot. So instead of stepping, you're literally sliding your leg in and out, and it's quite significantly more challenging. So it starts with a lateral step up, then a crossover step up, then a lateral split squat, then a lateral lunge, and then a sliding lateral lunge. You'd literally do a few sets of that once a week. You'd focus on one exercise for about 3 or 4 weeks, slowly increasing the weight. Then the next 3 or 4 weeks, you move to the next one. Next 3 or 4 weeks, you move to the next one, and you literally progress like that. And just slowly build yourself up. Now, that is a dead simple way of going about this, but it should do the job for the majority of hikers. And it'll help strengthen up sort of the inner thigh muscles. It'll help prepare the body to stabilize in a little bit of different range of motion. And when you're in those weird and wonderful positions on the trail, it should put you in good stead. And so for 95% of hikers, 99% of hikers, that's probably enough. But if we want to take this a little step further, and in the situation where you might be stepping into a hike which has a lot of this type of lateral movement. So you might be doing a massive traverse and you might be on that for 5 hours a day, where 1 foot, you're on that angle and you're going along for 5 hours a day. You might be doing a long beach walk with like really slanted sand. You might be doing a huge amount of rock scrambling for hours and hours on end. Or you might just be really aware that this trail, it is going to be very, very side to side motion. There's going to be a lot of extra challenge that for multiple hours. In that particular situation, I definitely recommend going through that strength work that I just recommended, but adding on a little bit extra. And here in this situation, you want to have a think about how can you expose and train your body for this type of movement so it can stabilize, can produce force, and be more comfortable in this type of movement for longer periods of time. So we're not just building strength in itself in these short blocks, but we're also building conditioning and capacity as well, which essentially means you can sustain this for longer periods of time. Now, 2 really, really easy ways to go about this is the first and foremost, a super simple one. If you do have access to a gym which has a sled, this can be really, really effective. And essentially you get the sled, you get a harness, and then instead of going back and forth, you literally do side steps. Step, 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 side to side along the track. Go the other way, step, step, step along the side, go the track, and do intervals like that. You might start off with doing a few laps at a time, and then doubling that, and doubling that, and doubling that, putting extra weight on, and literally just building up time where you're going with the body back and forth, but in this lateral movement. That can be super, super effective and very, very valuable for a hiker. And you might do 10 minutes of that at the end of a session, and then slowly build that up, or something like that. Very, very effective. Now, obviously, a lot of us don't have access to sleds. They're amazing, but if you don't have access to a sled, you can do something similar when you're doing your stair workouts. And so when we traditionally do our stair workouts, we go up and down the stairs, yada, yada, yada. In this situation, you'd sort of do side to side. So instead of facing straight up, you turn to your side and step up the stairs facing one way, step down the stairs facing the other, turn around the other way, and then go like that. And that way you can get a little bit of exposure into this sort of weird movement. And if you're doing longer hikes or longer treks, you can really build up that capacity there. And then you can get creative and you can start mixing it up with your forward and back. You can start doing side to side. You can start doing zigzags or whatever it may be. And you can get as creative as you want there. But if you are in the situation where you're aware that, look, the body does get a little bit uncomfortable on the trail when I'm in some of these different positions, this might be an area of training you want to consider. For most hikers, I probably would recommend having a look at that lateral strength training in one shape or another. And then for the people who are doing those longer hikes and more challenging and uneven hikes, have a think about that lateral sled work or the lateral stair climbs. Now, if you've been listening to this and you're like, I'm a little bit confused about these exercises, I want to see them in action, can't find them on YouTube, or I want a bit of help, or if you want a little bit extra direction around this and you are interested in this subject, 100% come and find me in the Training for Hiking and Trekking Facebook group. As I've said on this podcast many times, it's a great place where I can share videos and share a little extra information, dive into these subjects in a little bit more detail, and really, really build out these subjects that we've been talking about so you know exactly what you're doing. So if you're interested in that, you can find the Training for Hiking and Trekking Facebook group on Facebook, or I'll leave a link in the show notes below and you can check it out from there. So hopefully this episode's given you a bit of insight around this type of training. Hopefully it's given you a few ideas, and I highly recommend you put some of this into action. So have a lovely day. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.